So I want to talk tonight about a very specific issue in nonfiction visual media production that nobody wants to talk about. It is this huge elephant in the room, and the longer we ignore it, the more serious this is going to get. But before I dive into sort of the details of this problem, I first want to give you a little bit of background on me because it's going to help move the story forward. I have specialized in visual media production for the past 20 years. I started in documentary filmmaking. I fell in love with documentary filmmaking except for one thing, and that is that I hated the way documentary films looked. So after film school, I moved to Hollywood. I started training on feature films, music videos, advertising, and television episodics, and started working as a director of photography, then a director, then a producer, and now I'm a creative director at CODA Story, once again working in the nonfiction field, hopefully taking a lot of those lessons from the other genres. The reality is that it has never been a better environment for nonfiction visual media professionals. The tools have never been this accessible, the process has never been this accessible, the distribution has never been this accessible. But some things have not changed. And what has not changed is this basic story model. This has been the basic story model since the dawn of man. This is the basic story model since we were painting buffaloes on the sides of caves. You have a story, you push it into an audience to effect change. But there's a problem with this model, and the way we know there's a problem with this model is that if you look at all the visual stories that are out in the world today, the most important stories are not the most watched stories. Why are superhero feature films and shampoo commercials and music videos, why do they have so much more viewership than the stories that matter most in our lives? We've all seen these projects. They measure views in millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. But the projects about political repression, about disinformation, about financial markets, about war, they measure views in the thousands, 10,000s, if they're very lucky, hundreds of thousands. You guys recognize these images? These are all documentary films who have won Academy Awards. They've won Academy Awards in the past 5 years. I specialize in this field, and I have to say I have not even seen all of these films. We have a viewership problem. People say the problem is budget. Well, if documentary films had the budgets that Hollywood films have, then there would be no problem. We would have the viewers. But that's not the case. If I was to give a documentary filmmaker $50 million, the product would still not be something that had the views that are worthy of the story. Here's an example. This is an Indian Bollywood music video that I shot in Tbilisi 4 or 5 years ago. Super low budget. It was a lot of fun. It was a 2-day shoot. A week after being released, it had 13 million views. Now it has more than 90 million views, 90. So I don't believe it's the budget. So let's go back to our model. What is it exactly? If you saw this earlier, you probably noticed there's a piece missing because stories don't tell themselves. Even great stories don't tell themselves. And the piece that's missing is storytelling. And of course, we all talk about storytelling. Everybody knows about it. I'll bet every one of you in this room, storytelling is part of your professional lives in some way. There's something about storytelling that we who work in nonfiction visual content are not getting right. And I've made a few observations. These are not solutions, just some observations. First of all, we who work in nonfiction content put way too much emphasis on information and not enough emphasis on the viewer's experience. And if you want people to listen to your ideas, you have to lead with an experience. You have to create an experience for them first. Experience always before information. The next thing is that too often we take inspiration and references from other documentary films. So it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. And I mean, look at these images. Do any of you want to watch these films? I don't want to watch these films. These look horrible. We should be taking inspiration from outside this genre. Otherwise, we're following people. We want references that are outside. These are the references that I use. Ayvazovsky paintings, Bach fugues, minimalist interior design, and European oil painting. This is just me, but these are examples of how we need to look out. This is not a problem in narrative filmmaking. It only seems to be a problem in nonfiction filmmaking. This leads me to a very important point. Innovation doesn't happen inside disciplines. I mean, truly great innovation, disruptive innovation. It happens when disciplines intersect. It happens when in between genres, at the space where they overlap. That's where innovation really happens. Another really interesting thing that only seems to happen with nonfiction filmmakers, if you take the 5 major genres, we have music videos, episodic television, commercials, narrative features, and then nonfiction at the top. Everybody who works in most of these cross-pollinates. If someone shoots a music video, directs a music video one week, they shoot a feature film the next year, then they shoot a commercial. Except for the nonfiction guys. Those of us who make nonfiction projects typically only hang out with people that make nonfiction projects. We don't do other kinds of work, and so we don't get all that input. We don't get to cross-pollinate. This is the problem. We're living inside a bubble, and our work shows it. That's one of the reasons we don't have this viewership. The last observation I want to make is that we don't pay enough attention to these guys, the audience. We are very often so consumed with pushing our ideas out into the world that we lose track of the fact that the most important thing is the audience's experience with those ideas. We don't do enough test audiences. We don't do enough focus groups. These are all par for the course in other kinds of visual media. These are not solutions. These are just observations that can hopefully begin a conversation where these kinds of stories can get the kinds of viewership that we want. Here's my email. Send me an email. Let's keep talking about it. Look forward to it.